That year, scientists recorded the highest rate of ice melt in history, and from there, the nightmare began. At first, it was just harmless ancient bacteria discovered in the ice core samples. But then came something far more terrifying, a prehistoric virus that had lain dormant for millions of years, now stirring from its slumber. News of the virus spread globally, yet most people didn't pay attention. To them, it was just another headline about climate change, something they'd heard far too often to care anymore. Until the first infection cases were reported at a research station in Greenland. I still remember that fateful day clearly, when the first horrifying images began to surface on social media. A team of scientists had accidentally been exposed to the mysterious virus while extracting ancient ice samples. Within just a few hours of exposure, their bodies began to change in grotesque, unimaginable ways. At first, red rashes appeared on their skin, quickly spreading and turning black. Their skin began to crack open in large, jagged chunks, falling away to reveal raw muscles soaked in thick, dark blood. Their bodies trembled violently, bones seemingly trying to explode beneath the rotting flesh. One scientist, the only one still lucid, recorded the entire process. He captured footage of his colleagues with eyes rolled back, mouths agape in agony as their flesh tore apart like they were being mauled by an invisible beast. Then, something even worse happened. One person suddenly collapsed, their body convulsing as if gripped by an unseen force. Bones snapped audibly, vertebrae crushed and twisted like a tree branch under a heavy axe. His head slowly twisted backward, his eyes bulging from their sockets, and within seconds, the head dropped to the floor with a sickening thud, blood spraying from his neck like a fountain. The haunting screams that filled the lab still echo in my mind, and I couldn't look away from the screen. Those horrifying images kept playing on repeat in my head like some twisted horror film. And then, what was left of the unlucky victims began to decompose rapidly, their flesh liquefying, mixing with blood and organs, spilling across the floor in a grotesque flood. The stench became so unbearable that those who remained could only vomit in response. One man, after witnessing the carnage, clawed out his own eyes. Then he ripped open his own abdomen with his bare hands, desperate to free himself from the unspeakable pain. Within 24 hours, the research station had become a slaughterhouse. No one survived. The footage was swiftly wiped from the internet, but I knew what I had seen was real. The world had officially entered the apocalypse. Nations quickly locked down nearby regions and declared states of emergency, but it was already too late. The virus had escaped the Arctic, and its terror spread like wildfire. I could feel a deep, creeping fear embedded in my chest every time I closed my eyes. I would see the decaying corpses, hear the sickening crack of bones snapping, and smell that foul stench of blood and ruptured guts all over again. And the worst part is, I know it won't be long before I become one of them. We don't have much time left. The polar pandemic is slowly devouring the world, and no one can escape it. After the outbreak began in the Arctic, everything quickly descended into chaos. Major cities turned into living hells, corpses lay scattered across the streets, and agonizing screams echoed endlessly. People panicked, trying to flee from the death stalking them. But the more they ran, the more powerless they became against this monstrous virus. I lived in a small apartment in the heart of the city, witnessing every day as the world crumbled. The streets were eerily quiet, no longer filled with the rush of bustling lives. Instead, survivors wandered aimlessly, eyes hollow, bodies worn down. They looked like walking corpses, devoid of purpose. One day, while I was rummaging through the kitchen for something to eat, I heard pounding on the hallway door, loud and urgent. My heart thudded violently. My hands trembled as I crept toward the entrance. I couldn't let anyone in, no one could be trusted anymore. But the banging didn't stop, it grew faster, more frantic, as if the person outside was running from something horrific. I slowly opened the door, just a crack. Standing outside was a disheveled, panicked man. His eyes were bloodshot, hair matted, skin swollen with large oozing sores. He stammered, pleading, "Please, help me. I don't want to die." Before I could respond, he suddenly collapsed, convulsing violently. Sickening cracks rang out, his joints were breaking one by one. His eyes rolled back, his mouth gaping open but silent. I stood frozen, unable to tear my eyes away from the horror unfolding before me. His body began to transform rapidly. The sores on his skin burst open, spraying blackened blood and pus. His spine stretched unnaturally, piercing through his skin like sharp stakes. His abdomen swelled grotesquely before exploding, organs spilled out, mixed with blood, forming a foul puddle on the floor. I slammed the door shut, struggling to hold back the bile rising in my throat. That grotesque image had carved itself into my mind. And that's when I realized, to survive, I had to follow certain rules. A few days later, while I was still trying to make sense of what I'd witnessed, a strange parcel appeared at my door. No one knew where it came from. But in times like these, nothing made sense anymore. I opened it. Inside was a small, yellowed booklet, along with a handwritten note scrawled in shaky letters, "Survival Rules. Read and obey. Unless you want a fate worse than death." My hands trembled as I flipped through the pages. The rules weren't long or complicated, but they carried a brutality that was hard to ignore. 1. Stay away from the infected. They're no longer human, but living monsters. At any stage of infection, the virus will take over, and they'll lose control, attacking anyone nearby. If you see someone showing symptoms, get away immediately and never look back. 2. Never keep lights on for too long at night. Light attracts the creatures, those twisted beings mutated by the virus. They can smell and hunt in the dark. They will break through doors, climb walls, and won't stop until they find you. 3. Don't eat food from unknown sources. The virus spreads through air, water, and even food. If you're unsure of its origin, destroy it. There are stories of people becoming infected just by eating a seemingly normal slice of bread. 4. Always check your surroundings before sleeping. Make sure there are no creatures hiding in your home. Don't assume they can't get in. Some of them can mimic ordinary objects, waiting patiently for the perfect moment to strike. 5. If you hear your name being called, don't answer. Not if it's from outside, not even if it's someone you've lost. Remember, it's not real. Those voices belong to the mutated creatures trying to lure you out. Once you answer, you will never come back. As I reached the last rule, a cold shiver ran down my spine. These rules sounded insane, but given the world I was living in now, they might be the only thing keeping me alive. I began following each of the rules, little by little. At night, I turned off all the lights, locked every door, and made sure not a single sound came from my apartment. But despite my efforts, I couldn't stop the nightmares from coming. In my dreams, I was surrounded by grotesque creatures, rotting bodies, blood, decaying flesh. They screamed, clawed, and tore into my skin, dragging me down into some hellish abyss. Then one night, as I drifted in and out of restless sleep, I heard a voice whispering from outside my window, "David. David." I woke instantly, heart racing. That was my name. Someone was calling me in the dead of night. Terror flooded my chest. But I remembered rule number 5, I wasn't supposed to answer. I sat motionless on the bed, too scared to move, barely breathing. The voice grew closer, as if the speaker was now standing just outside the window, only steps away. "David, open the door, don't be afraid." I clenched my jaw and gripped the knife I always kept by my bedside. One thought echoed through my mind: don't answer. Don't open the door. The voice went on the entire night, until dawn broke. I still don't know how I survived until morning. But when the first rays of sunlight streamed through the window, I knew I had barely escaped death. Those rules in the booklet, no matter how absurd they seemed, were real. And I had to follow them if I wanted to survive in this hellish world. I had seen far too many horrors, and I knew the nightmare was only just beginning. It truly became real when the grotesque disease spread rapidly through the air, through water, even through a simple touch. The streets of the city I once loved were now soaked in the stench of rot and blood, a smell so vile it hit like a punch to the gut every time I left my shelter in search of food. Corpses were everywhere, on sidewalks, in abandoned cars, even in the middle of the roads. Those still alive were running in panic, but their efforts were in vain. This plague spared no one. One by one, they fell under its cruelty, their bodies twisted and deformed, flesh rotting, black blood gushing from ever-spreading wounds. I once saw a woman, she looked like a mother, holding her child tightly in her arms. Both were dead. But death wasn't the worst part. The woman's body began to transform. Her eyes shot open, wide and unblinking, her mouth agape as if screaming, but no sound came out. The skin on her face and body melted away, revealing the stark white bone underneath. Her decaying arms could no longer hold the child, and the lifeless little body dropped to the ground. Black blood trickled across the child's small frame. But the child didn't stay dead. It stood up, its eyes blank, flesh corroded by the disease. It began wandering aimlessly, releasing a low, guttural moan, like the dying breath of a damned soul. Then suddenly, it lunged forward, attacking others, biting, tearing, devouring everything it could. Flesh and black blood splattered everywhere, creating a scene of pure horror I will never forget. The ones who didn't turn into the undead became something even worse, grotesque monsters beyond comprehension. I once saw a group of people, what looked like a family, being torn apart by the virus. Their bodies twisted into horrifying shapes, flesh rotting away to reveal swollen boils filled with pus. These boils grew at an alarming rate, expanding until they exploded, spraying black fluid and blood everywhere. Their bodies collapsed in on themselves, like corpses crushed by some invisible force. The most horrifying scene I ever witnessed was when the virus attacked a man's brain. He just stood there, eyes wide and staring blankly ahead, completely unresponsive. Then, without warning, his head exploded. Blood and shards of skull flew in every direction. His brain became nothing more than a pulpy mass spilling out of the shattered remnants of his skull. And yet, bizarrely, his body didn't fall. It remained upright, his fingers twitching as if trying to grasp something that wasn't there. Only when his entire frame finally collapsed did he become just another nameless corpse littering the streets. This virus doesn't just kill, it transforms. It turns humans into horrifying, unrecognizable abominations. These things no longer feel pain, no longer fear anything. They only know how to tear, devour, infect, with an insatiable bloodlust. Once, I had to face one of them while scavenging for food in an abandoned store. I heard a noise behind me, and when I turned around, I saw a creature that had once been a man. Now, it was nothing but a heap of oozing flesh, its body riddled with festering wounds. Its eyes were empty. Its mouth hung open, producing no sound, only a labored, wheezing breath. Before I could react, it charged. Its sharp claws tore through my skin. I stumbled back, trying to keep distance, but it was fast and violently relentless. With no other choice, I drove my knife straight into its eye. It let out a sickening scream but didn't stop. Thick black blood gushed from the wound, and it kept coming. Only after I stabbed its head repeatedly, twisting the blade deep inside, did it finally collapse, its body convulsing, black blood pooling on the floor. I stood there, gasping for air, watching its corpse twitch. I knew I had to leave immediately, before others like it picked up the scent. But that image, of the creature, its body twitching in death, stayed with me like a shadow, haunting every one of my dreams. Those who were once human are now little more than walking corpses, twisted ghosts in a world that's fallen apart. The plague keeps spreading. No one knows where it ends. Every day, I witness more horror, visions I know will never leave me. But I have no other choice. I have to survive. I have to obey the rules, no matter how cruel or inhuman they may be. Because in this world, survival is everything. Now, I curl up in the corner of my room, my trembling hand clutching a dagger. My eyes stay fixed on the TV screen in front of me, the last remaining thread that ties me to a world that has gone mad and become unrecognizable. The screen flickers. A piercing static shrieks from the speakers, thickening the already stifling air. Then a voice comes through, emotionless, robotic, issuing another emergency broadcast. I barely recognize it as human anymore. The virus is spreading at an uncontrollable rate. All citizens are advised to remain indoors. There is currently no effective vaccine or treatment. The best course of action is to protect yourself by any means necessary. Avoid contact with strangers, especially those showing signs of infection. I know this news will terrify anyone still alive. But for me, it only confirms what I've long suspected: the world has lost all hope. The virus spares no one. And now, I'm trapped in this tiny apartment, alone and terrified. In the days before, I wandered countless streets seeking food and water. The chilling presence of death seemed to permeate everything. But now, with the government's warning, I no longer dare to leave. From within my apartment, I hear screams, running footsteps, and the horrifying howls of those creatures. These horrific sounds echo everywhere, like a bloody symphony of despair, announcing that the apocalypse has arrived. Neighbors I once saw every day are gone. The elderly woman across the hall, who always greeted me with a kind smile, has vanished. I no longer hear her shuffle across the wooden floor, nor see the faint light from her apartment window at night. Some say she took her own life, unable to bear the horror of the infection. Others say she's become one of them, wandering the dark corridors, hunting weak souls to bite and infect. But the scariest thing isn't those creatures out there, it's the fear quietly corroding inside me, moment by moment. And I realize, that fear will be the thing that kills me first. I can't stop thinking about what's happening to those I love, my family, my friends. Are they still alive? Or have they been ravaged like so many others? I'm too scared to call, too afraid to open the door. A single misstep could cost me my life. A sudden knock jolts me out of my spiral of terrified thoughts. It's soft, but insistent. My heart pounds, sweat beads on my forehead. I know I shouldn't open it. It could well be one of those shape-shifting monsters trying to lure me out. Yet the knocking continues, steady, determined, as though someone truly is waiting. I rise, tentatively step toward the door. Outside, the hallway is pitch black, lit only by a dim, flickering bulb. My breath catches, I listen. Someone is really out there. But is it a survivor, or a monster? I can't bear it any longer and whisper, who is it? There's no answer. Just deadly silence. My chest tightens. Fear mounts with each second. Finally, with no choice left, I open the door. It creaks open slowly, pulling me into another world. There stands a man, his clothes soaked in dried blood, his wounds oozing pus. His eyes are empty, lifeless. But the most horrifying thing. His hands are deformed, long, twisted fingers like claws, no longer human. I recognize him, it's Michael, my neighbor. Once strong and kind, but now reduced to a living corpse, completely consumed and transformed by the virus. He doesn't speak. He simply stands, staring at me with void-filled eyes. Black blood trickles from his mouth in thick rivulets, pooling on the floor in a mournful, crimson-black stain. In those eyes, I see not just thirst for blood, but something more, like a final, broken plea. But I know, Michael is gone. There's nothing left but the empty husk of a monster. I have no choice. I grip the knife and plunge it into Michael's chest. He doesn't scream, only a faint groan. His empty eyes meet mine one last time. As I withdraw the blade, black blood gushes, splattering my face, thick, foul-smelling. Michael collapses, convulsing in a final, grotesque shudder before going still. I stand frozen, bloodied, terrified, overwhelmed with regret. But I know, I had no other choice. Survival isn't just a goal anymore, it's the only thing left. And to survive, I've had to do things I never imagined. In the days that follow, the knocking at my door ceases. Only absolute silence remains. I dare not go outside, dare not open a window. I know the plague is still spreading, and every passing day fewer souls remain. The government can command us to stay home, but they cannot rescue us from the fear growing inside. I've lost track of how long I've been here. Time seems to have vanished between nightmares and the dead silence of a world gone mad. But one morning, when faint sunlight filters through the curtains, I decide, just once, I must see what's out there again. I slowly draw the curtain aside, closing my eyes for a moment to steel myself. Then I open them. The scene before me sent a chill down my spine. The street below looked like something straight out of hell. Corpses were scattered everywhere, one pile over another, forming a mountain of human remains. Their bodies were rotting, blood and flesh oozing in all directions. The stench of death from hundreds, maybe thousands of decaying bodies rose up even to where I stood high above, nearly making me vomit. I saw the remains of the elderly, children, men, and women. No one had escaped this catastrophe. Some corpses were so decomposed they were unrecognizable, with their flesh melting down onto the concrete, leaving trails of black blood and severed body parts tangled together. But the most horrifying thing wasn't the corpses, it was the monsters still moving among the ruins. I watched as one of the undead hunched over the corpse of an elderly man. Its deformed fingers clawed and tore off chunks of flesh, then chewed them greedily. Blood and human tissue dripped from its mouth in a grotesque display beyond human comprehension. Its eyes were rolled back, empty, but the hunger, the bloodlust, was unmistakable in every motion. I saw a child, or what was left of one, crawling slowly across the pile of corpses. Its head was misshapen, part of the skull smashed open, exposing brain matter. But the most terrifying part was that it was still moving. Tiny hands with torn fingers dragged its body forward, as if searching for something to eat. Its pale lips quivered, and suddenly it opened its mouth wide, biting into the leg of a nearby corpse. Even more disturbing was another undead creature, eating its own body. I froze in place, eyes wide in horror, watching as it shoved its own deformed fingers into its mouth and chewed them like a starving beast. There was no awareness, no reason, only a mindless frenzy driven by a hunger for flesh. Just as I was consumed by the horror of what I was witnessing, the sound of vehicles echoed in the distance. A convoy of military trucks appeared, breaking the deathly silence that had blanketed the city. Armored vehicles rolled down the road, soldiers in full protective gear disembarked, weapons ready, sweeping the streets and firing at anything that moved. I sat in my dark room, the flickering light of the only working TV casting shadows across my face. The news broadcast was faint but terrifying. The virus had evolved. It no longer spread solely through bites or direct contact. Now, simply breathing the same air as an infected person could make you the next victim. The virus attacked the respiratory system, flooding the lungs with blood and mucus within minutes. And the worst part? It could remain suspended in the air for hours, waiting to invade anyone unlucky enough to inhale it. I tried not to think about it, but fear gnawed at my mind by the hour. The walls around me felt like they were closing in, turning my apartment into a deadly trap. Every creak from the window or hallway sent my heart racing, convinced the virus had somehow made its way inside. One day, while sitting in silence, trying to steady my breath, I was pulled again by that dangerous curiosity. I needed to know, just how bad had things become out there. I crept toward the window, carefully lifted the curtain, and looked down at the street below. What I saw was a living nightmare. The once bustling streets were now desolate, littered with corpses. The military presence had diminished. Perhaps they had retreated to safer zones, abandoning the city to its remaining survivors. A few citizens, or at least those brave enough, were trying to clear the bodies. But their efforts were futile. They wore protective suits, thick masks, and face shields, using long poles to move the corpses. These bodies were so decomposed their flesh sagged off the bones, reeking of rot. Each time one was moved, black-brown fluid oozed from the open wounds, forming thick, slimy puddles on the ground. One man pushed a corpse with all his strength, shoving it into a drainage ditch, already packed with dozens of other bodies, stacked into a putrid, unimaginable heap of decay. The scene that unfolded before my eyes made my spine crawl. I saw a woman in her early 30s collapse while trying to drag a corpse into a trash bin. She began coughing violently, then crumpled to the ground in convulsions. Those around her rushed in to help, but soon they too started coughing uncontrollably. Blood poured from their mouths, staining their masks red. Within seconds, all had fallen, bodies writhing, mouths frothing, clearly poisoned. Their deaths consumed them from within. Others who witnessed this panicked and fled, but the virus spread too fast for any escape to matter. I watched as a man collapsed after only a few steps. His whole body shook before going limp. Even those wearing masks and protective suits around him dropped, blood streaming from mouth, nose, and eyes. Within minutes, the entire group lay motionless, soulless corpses on the street. I then saw a team in white hazmat gear, health workers, it seemed, trying to contain the devastation. They sprayed disinfectant on the bodies and survivors, hoping to neutralize the virus in the air. But it was futile. The liquid washed away slime from the ground but didn't affect airborne contagion. The virus floated on, lurking, waiting. One medic stumbled and collapsed. I could hear his hacking cough, broken gasps echoing in silence. His colleagues tried to pull him away, but the virus had claimed him. His eyes rolled back, foam formed around his lips, and his body convulsed violently as black blood poured out before he fell like a wooden puppet with no strings. The chaos lasted for hours. Wave after wave of people tried to move corpses, only to be infected themselves. Cries for help, hacking coughs, the thud of bodies hitting the pavement, like witnessing the world's end. There was no life left, only death and destruction. I backed away from the window, closed it, and drew the curtains tight. I didn't want to see any more. Fear had entirely taken hold. The virus was beyond control, no place was safe. I knew I couldn't step outside, I couldn't risk sharing the air with those turning into the undead. But I also realized I couldn't stay cooped up in this apartment forever. Death was too close, and I had only one choice left: keep fighting to survive, or accept my fate. When I woke the next morning, the room was pitch black, like it was swallowing me whole. The faint light filtering through the curtains only cast faint shadows on the floor, offering no comfort. Instead, an invisible terror clung to me, making it hard to breathe. My throat was sore and raw, as if something was lodged inside, tearing at me from within. I couldn't swallow, even saliva hurt. I tried to swallow, but the pain intensified. A burning warmth surged up from my stomach, triggering a relentless cough fit. Each cough felt as if my chest was about to explode. Every time I coughed, I gagged something slimy and warm from my mouth and nose. I looked down at my trembling hands, to see bright red blood. I wiped it away, but it kept flowing. Panicked, I rushed to the bathroom, switched on the light, and stared into the mirror. The reflection was no longer mine. My eyes were bloodshot, veins mapping my face like webs. My nose bled uncontrollably, crimson trails ran down my chin and neck, soaking my shirt. My lips were cracked and bleeding. My skin was drawn and deathly pale, no trace of life left. I stumbled back, unable to believe what I saw. I had been infected. Desperately, I tried to wash the blood from my face, but the more I cleaned, the more appeared. The coughing escalated, forcing me to my knees, clutching my chest in excruciating pain. Weakness and helplessness spread through me like poison in my veins. The bathroom walls seemed to close in, crushing me with fear and despair. I forced myself to calm down. This couldn't be real. I wasn't infected. But my body was betraying me, and I couldn't deny the signs any longer. I had to do something. I had to fight this nightmare. In a panic, I searched the apartment for anything to help. I remembered the warnings: keep distance. Wear a mask. But now, none of that mattered. The virus had already taken hold. The virus wasn't just in the air. It was deep inside me, rooted into every cell, every blood vessel, every breath. I found an old mask and put it on, but it felt meaningless. I spotted some cold pills in the cupboard, but I knew they wouldn't help. I was trapped in a death trap with no escape. Panic turned into despair. Then I remembered the doctor's final advice on TV: if you suspect infection, isolate immediately. Don't contact anyone. So I locked myself in the bedroom, sealing every crack with tape, ensuring no air could get out. But instead of safety, I felt like I was buried alive in a coffin of my own fear and hopelessness. The airtight room felt suffocating. Each breath tore at my lungs. My body burned from the inside. Sweat poured out like a waterfall, yet a bone-deep chill consumed me. Fever racked my body, leaving me shaking and curled in the covers. No blanket could keep me warm. I was losing the battle I couldn't win. Thoughts of death, of becoming one of those bloodthirsty monsters, cut through me like daggers. I wanted to stop this nightmare, but I didn't know how. I felt cornered like a caged animal. In utter desperation, I considered ending it all. But I didn't have the courage. I was too terrified, too weak, too broken. Every second pulled me deeper into darkness. Time was slipping away. The virus had taken root in me, and it was only a matter of time before it destroyed me completely. The pain, the panic, the despair, it was a living nightmare with no end. I stood at the edge of death, and there was no escape. I lay in bed, every breath heavier than the last. Each inhale felt like strangulation, each exhalation burned into my bones. I tried to control my breathing, but my body wouldn't obey. I glanced down at my arm and froze. I saw pale, snake-like veins creeping beneath my skin, twisting through my flesh. My skin turned purplish, as if the blood had stopped flowing. Each heartbeat brought fresh agony, a torture from within. I clenched my teeth to keep from screaming, but moans slipped through. Paralysis spread from my toes to my skull. Cold death crawled up from below, dragging me into the void. I tried to move, to fight, but my body refused to respond. I was nothing but an empty shell, motionless, waiting for death. My arms felt lifeless. I tried to lift them but couldn't. Pain spiked across my joints, bones grinding as if crushed from inside. I was being torn apart, every vessel, every fiber stretched to the breaking point. My vision blurred, the room spinning and darkening. Reality receded, drawing me into nothingness, drifting like a lost soul with nowhere to go. The cold grip of death was closer than ever, and I could no longer escape it. I fought to cling to life, but my body was too tired, too weak to resist. Control slipped away. Everything faded into a distant haze. Life ebbed from me by the second, and only a fragile thread of consciousness remained before I would succumb to darkness. In my delirium, I heard my heart beat slow, as if it were giving up its final fight. The weak thumps drifted further apart, until they stopped entirely. Death was so close, and I was powerless to stop it. All around me dissolved into endless black, cold, silent void. No sensation remained, only a deep fear pulling me into nothingness. Then, total silence. Suddenly, I awoke from the haze. My breathing steadied, and my heart pounded, proof I was still alive. But the feeling brought no comfort, only a vague, endless dread. My mind was clouded, but bit by bit, I realized I was still here, though I should have been dead. Looking down at my arm, I felt as though I'd woken in a waking nightmare. Beneath my purplish skin, strange growths bulged, not tumors exactly, but bone-like protrusions pushing through flesh in agony. Yet, I felt no pain. Only a chilling numbness spread through me. I couldn't sit and do nothing. With trembling hands, I rose from the bed and reached for the knife on the table. The cold blade glinted, and I knew what I had to do: remove the monstrous growth sprouting from my body. Each stroke of the blade cut deep into flesh. Blood flowed, but not normal blood. Thick, black sludge oozed from the wounds. It stank so foul it burned on my skin. I injected a dose of antibiotics, hoping to slow the mutation. But I knew it was only temporary. Nothing could save me from the looming death. I stared into the mirror. The person staring back wasn't me anymore. I turned on the TV, desperate for hope. News reported that a vaccine was in emergency trials, usable in special cases. This could be my last chance, survival or total mutation. I didn't know if I was alive or already dead, but I knew one thing: I couldn't sit here and wait for my body to collapse. I decided to leave my apartment, my prison, and find the vaccine trial. The numbness kept me grounded, but I understood time was running out. Each step reminded me my body was changing, something moving within me, seeking escape. By the time I reached the trial site, I was worse than ever. The cut seeped horrific black fluid, and my body was falling apart, muscle by muscle decaying from within. People recoiled at my presence, as though I were a monster. I didn't care. All I wanted was that vaccine shot, even if death followed. Medical staff in hazmat suits edged toward me with fear. A large syringe filled with pale yellow liquid was handed to me. I knew this was my last chance. I pressed the needle into my vein and injected the cold fluid. Immediately, a wave of cold washed over me. Everything blurred, but the pain and fear subsided. Only the haze of dying remained. I closed my eyes, waiting for whatever came next, salvation or a deeper nightmare. Darkness enveloped me again. I didn't know if I would ever wake. When I did, the first thing I felt was damp cold in the sealed room. I opened my eyes to gray concrete walls, no windows, no light. The damp air was suffocating, cut off entirely from the world outside. I tried to move but discovered I was strapped to a rigid chair. Ropes bound my limbs tightly. The fear of imprisonment made me panic, but what terrified me more was my body. The dull pain returned. It felt like my body was entering an even worse phase. Time dragged painfully. I had no idea how long I'd been restrained, but the pain only intensified. The cuts that once leaked black fluid were now heavily infected. My skin itched and throbbed, like millions of ants crawling beneath it. After about 10 hours, the pain escalated to unbearable levels. Old symptoms returned with brutal force, my body convulsed, each joint raked by stabbing pain, like blades tearing into bone. I tried to scream, but only dry moans escaped. The world spun around me, as if I was sinking into a black storm. My arms and legs began to swell. My skin stretched taut, as though something was pumping into it. Oozing fluid seeped from the wounds. Now they weren't just black, but shifting from black, greenish, pale yellow, to bright red. A sickening, rotting stench filled the air. Droplets slashed through protective shields, melting them before falling as dark stains on the floor. I heard footsteps and unfamiliar voices outside, but no one came. No one freed me. Everything blurred, and I slid toward unconsciousness again. My body convulsed with fever. Intense tremors shook me as if I were being crushed from within. Each heartbeat, each breath brought excruciating agony. I couldn't control myself anymore. All I could do was lie there, writhing in torment, waiting for death, or a miracle. The room was silent, yet far from peaceful. I felt trapped in a cold iron cage, with no escape, no hope. Death hovered close, and I didn't know if another chance remained. Time lost all meaning. My surroundings became stranger, more distant. Deep inside me, I felt myself drifting into eternal darkness, a place without light or life, where only unspeakable fear remained. Then, as I lay in that dark secret room, the pain began to fade. The convulsions and paralysis receded, replaced by a dreamlike haze. I felt unbound, floating into another realm, a gentle, warm dream of peace. In that dream, I stood on a stunning beach, soft, cool sand beneath my feet, waves gently lapping the shore, and the sun shining brightly overhead. The sound of sea and birds chimed in harmony, carrying me to serenity. I looked around at lush green grass and colorful wildflowers. The air was fresh, scented with ocean breeze and blossoms. It felt like paradise, no pain, no fear, no suffering. I walked along the beach, each step leaving a graceful imprint on the sand, filling me with pure freedom. I paused under a large tree's shade, feeling invincible. I gazed at a group of people near the water's edge laughing together, carefree. I wanted to join them, but as I approached, they blurred like dissipating clouds. A strange sorrow welled within me. The peace slipped away. The ocean darkened, Waves grew violent, churning black and angry. The sun vanished behind storm clouds. I couldn't move or escape, as if my fear itself had unleashed the sea's wrath. Suddenly, I remembered the secret room, my wounds, and the returning pain, more intense than ever. The dream faded, and I drifted toward unconsciousness again. The sea became a mirror of my deepest fears. I awoke feeling robbed of the peace I yearned for. The room was still and silent. Pain and paralysis gripped me once more. That dream, now only a hazy memory, one small reminder that reality remains a bleak abyss. When I woke again, I felt utterly exhausted. Opening my eyes, I found myself strapped to a hospital bed. The room was brighter, harsh white light from fluorescent bulbs, cold and alien. My body remained restrained, this time by medical equipment, not rope. The pain had lessened, but the numbness lingered. I saw healthcare workers in full protective gear and masks standing around me. One, likely a nurse, was injecting something into my arm. The needle's prick triggered panic, but I had no energy to resist. Medication flowed into me, easing pain but creating a strange, foggy haze. My vision blurred, head heavy, thoughts chaotic and unfocused. I overheard whispered conversation among the medical staff. Though fragmented, it chilled me. A leader's low, tense voice said, "We can't let this get out. This virus is from a failed government experiment. It leaked and caused a global catastrophe." Those words echoed in my mind like ominous bells. My ordeal felt part of an unwinnable war, a horrifying test. I didn't know if I was still alive, or already part of the experiment. As I closed my eyes, I felt suspended between life and death, each second a collision with uncertainty, an unspoken dread. Death still stalked me, cold and persistent. Finally, in that fog, I surrendered to endless sleep. I didn't know if I would wake in another world, or stay trapped in this nightmare. I had no strength left to resist, only a quiet, hopeless waiting in the murky darkness of the unknown. My story ends in uncertainty and fading echoes, where reality and illusion intertwine. Am I alive, or dead? Is there still hope for humanity to escape this disaster? All remains shrouded in muffled voices and dim light, in a world where truth and illusion have merged.